Well, well, well. Look who everyone's whispering about today. You feel it, don't you? The eyes, the tension, the silence that suddenly follows when you enter the room. Oh, they were loud before, so brave when your back was turned. But now they sip their words like poison and swallow them before you can taste their fear. Because you, my dear chaos bringer, are the hot topic. And not the kind they love. No, no. You're the kind they fear. The kind they can't control. The kind that walks into a room and changes the entire temperature. You shut the whole group down. Not with volume, not with theatrics, but with truth, with presence, with the type of power that doesn't need permission to exist. You didn't ask to be liked. You didn't play by their rules. You didn't water yourself down to be more digestible. And now they sit there, fidgeting, faces tight, lips locked, because you burned their comfort zone to the ground. They talk about you when you're gone, because they can't talk when you're present. You rearranged the whole damn energy. They planned the conversation, and then you rewrote the script without asking for a pen. You shattered the illusion, and illusions are what keep weak people safe. See, most of them, they survive by staying predictable, by pretending, by forming little cliques of mediocrity where no one shines too bright, no one dares too big, no one speaks too loud. But then you arrived, you, with your unapologetic mind, your cutthroat honesty, your refusal to play along, and now they're on hush mode. Oh, they'll say you're too much, too intense, too bold, too direct. But what they really mean is, you're everything they wish they had the spine to be. Let them talk. Let them whisper in corners like insects hiding from the light. Let them build narratives to make sense of your strength. Because that's what people do when they're afraid. And they are afraid of you, afraid of your clarity, afraid of your confidence, afraid of your refusal to bow. You didn't just shut the group down, you dismantled the hierarchy. You exposed the insecurity beneath their opinions. You showed that most people don't speak from truth. They speak from fear, from approval, from ego, but not you. You're a walking confrontation, a living spotlight on everything they don't want to admit. You are the itch under their skin they can't scratch away. And here's the beauty, you don't need them. You don't need their praise, their permission, their validation, their cowardly approval. You are the storm, you are the conversation, you are the shift in the atmosphere that no one saw coming. And now they flinch at your presence. They fumble their words. They play it cool. But we both know they're praying you don't look their way. Because one word from you, one glance, and their whole mask cracks. You're not controversial. You're accurate. You're not a lot. You're everything. Wear that title. Own that silence you cause. Let them sit in discomfort. Let them wonder what you'll say next. Because you have earned that tension. You're not here to be nice. You're not here to be liked. You're not here to blend in. You're here to dominate, to disrupt, to dismantle the fake, and stand as the raw truth, the hot topic. You're more than that. You're the fire that made the topic burn. You're the explosion they didn't expect. You're the memory they can't shake, the name that echoes even in silence. And the haters? Let them rot in their hush, because when real power walks in the room, the noise always dies. The haters, they whisper your name like a warning, because that's what you are now. A disruption, a breach in their comfort, a crack in the mask they've spent years gluing together with fake smiles, weak egos, and empty validation. You didn't just walk into the room. You exposed the architecture. You showed them that the walls they built with flattery and passive aggression crumble the moment a real one walks in. You made them realize their whole dynamic was a house of glass, and you showed up swinging a hammer, not out of rage, but out of truth. They thought they could ignore you, thought they could drown you out. But your silence hits harder than their speeches. Your stillness is more terrifying than their shouting. Because when someone like you exists, someone who doesn't need approval, doesn't need a side, doesn't need a script, the entire system starts to break. They don't know how to respond to someone who isn't performing. You don't wear their fake laughs. You don't beg for their shallow praise. You're not trying to climb their ladder. You're the one who walks in and removes the entire ceiling. And now, they don't know where to look. Because everything you say holds a mirror to the weakness they've been trying to hide. Every word you drop peels back another layer of their pretend confidence. Every glance you give pierces deeper than any insult they could ever throw. You carry power in your refusal to play the game. That's what kills them inside. They've lived their entire lives in performance mode, constantly managing perception, constantly adjusting for approval, constantly avoiding truth. And then you showed up, you, with your disregard for fake rules, with your unfiltered conviction, with that vibe that says, say what you want. I've already survived worse. You shut down their whole rhythm. You paused their momentum. You triggered something they can't unfeel. They say you made it awkward. No, you made it real. And they weren't ready for that. They've spent years hiding behind small talk and shallow politics. And you cut through it like a scalpel across a paper crown. Their reactions are proof. The way they stall, the way they glance sideways, searching for someone to back them up. The way their voice tightens when you challenge their script. That's fear, not of you physically, but of what you represent. You are living, breathing proof that they are not untouchable. That someone can walk in with nothing but presence and tilt the entire room on its axis. And they hate that you didn't even try. They hate that you don't need the spotlight, because somehow it still follows you. They hate that your words echo longer than their rehearsed speeches. They hate that you carry wounds they couldn't survive, and somehow you made them into armor. They're used to playing king of the sandbox, but you reminded them this isn't a playground. You reminded them what real power looks like. You reminded them how loud the truth sounds when someone finally speaks it without apology. And now they're all looking around waiting for someone else to restore the balance, to take back control, to cut you down to size. But there's nothing they can do, because deep down, they know the throne they built was never real. Fabricated power, propped up by repetition and groupthink. But you broke the pattern. You reminded them that real power doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be undeniable. They spent years building that illusion. Echo chambers, favoritism, empty praise disguised as support. They learned how to play the game so well. They forgot it was a game until you walked in and flipped the board. No announcement, no agenda, just presence. You became the event. The moment they lost control of the room and couldn't figure out why, they tried to reset the dynamic, tried to steer the energy back to safe territory, tried to smirk, tried to laugh, tried to ignore. But none of it worked. Because when you arrive, truth follows. And truth, it has a nasty habit of sticking, of clinging to the walls, of unsettling the quiet fakeness they worked so hard to maintain. They thought dominance was about volume, about clout, about alliances. But you've got none of that. And still they fold. That's the part that haunts them. You don't have the numbers, You don't have the approval. You don't have the seat at their table. You have something worse. You have nothing to lose. And someone with nothing to lose can't be threatened, can't be bribed, can't be silenced. You're not performing for the audience. You are the disruption the audience came to see. They talk behind your back because they can't survive facing you. They dissect your words not because they disagree, but because they felt it too deeply. It shook something in them they didn't want touched. You reminded them of their own cowardice, their own silence in moments that mattered, their own weakness in the face of confrontation. And now every time they look at you, they're staring into the version of themselves that never came to be. They'll never admit it. They'll call you a problem, difficult, aggressive, toxic. Because it's easier than admitting that they've never seen anyone stand alone and not flinch. You terrify them. Not because you're cruel, but because you're free. You move how you want, speak when you want, say what they're all thinking and pretend not to feel. You don't check the room before you speak. You don't wait for the nod. You don't audition for respect. You walk in with it already embedded in your tone. And that kind of presence destroys structures. Every time you speak, you tear another thread from their safety net. Every time you challenge them, you strip another coat of paint from their mask. Every time you exist loudly and unapologetically, you remind them what they are not. This isn't about a group. This isn't about a room. This isn't even about shutting anyone down. This is about waking people up. And you woke up the whole system. And now it's glitching in your presence. Scrambling for control, searching for structure, reaching for the script they memorized their entire lives, only to realize it doesn't work on you. You're not playing the role they rehearsed for. You're the unpredictable variable, the anomaly in their system of predictable power, plays, and carefully constructed personas. You're the storm that showed up with no warning, no costume, no leash. They don't know what to do with someone who doesn't flinch when isolated, who doesn't beg when misunderstood, who doesn't fold just to keep the peace. They were raised on fear. Fear of being the outcast, fear of not being liked, fear of rocking the boat. You came in and sank the whole fleet, not to watch them drown, but to prove that the water was never theirs to begin with. And now they sit in the wreckage, soaking wet in their own discomfort, wondering how you did it without raising your voice, without breaking a sweat, without ever asking for permission. 'Cause the truth is, you didn't shut the group down to be petty. You didn't even mean to make a scene. You were just being you, and that was enough to collapse their foundation. You didn't come to dominate. But they gave you the throne anyway, because no one else could sit in that fire without burning alive. They crowned you with their silence. Their submission wasn't spoken, it was felt. In every avoided eye, every nervous chuckle, every question they no longer felt brave enough to ask. They used to measure power in applause. You made them redefine it in tension. You shifted the entire gravity of the space, and they felt it in their chests. That tightening, that panic, that subconscious understanding that the hierarchy had just been rearranged. You know what's worse than being hated? Being respected by people who wish they didn't have to respect you. And that's where you stand now, not liked, not welcomed, but undeniable. They don't invite you in. They react to your arrival. You change the story just by entering the frame. That's the kind of power they can't process, not because they haven't seen it, but because they never thought it could exist in someone they couldn't control. You're not their leader. You're not their rival. You're their reminder. of everything they tried to forget, of the version of themselves they sacrificed to fit in, of the fire they buried just to stay safe. You didn't just shut down a group. You exposed the fragility of the entire structure. And now, they're not mad because you ruined something. They're mad because you revealed it was already broken. And they knew it. They all knew it. Every last one of them. Pretending the system worked, pretending the room was equal, pretending their voices mattered the same. But behind their smug little smiles and fake solidarity, they knew exactly who was being ignored, who was being sidelined, who was being quietly erased for the comfort of the fragile. And you walked in like a reminder they couldn't erase. You didn't ask for space, you took it, not by force, but by refusing to shrink. You didn't fight for a voice. You used it, not to beg, but to cut through the noise like a scalpel through skin. And the moment you did, the whole act collapsed. Not because you were aggressive, not because you were disruptive, but because they were exposed. You see, when someone walks in with unapologetic clarity, everyone pretending starts to panic. That's why they talked louder. That's why they laughed at nothing. That's why they scrambled to interrupt you, to label you, to twist your tone into something ugly. Because truth always sounds like violence when you've built your peace on a lie. They didn't expect someone with presence. They didn't plan for someone who wouldn't flinch when outnumbered. They didn't rehearse what to do when the outsider didn't need to be let in, because you never needed their door. You were never trying to sit at their table. You were flipping it, and that scared them more than anything, because for the first time, someone refused to play the game, and still won. They tried to pretend you weren't the topic, but their energy said otherwise. The way they stiffened when you spoke, the way they went quiet after you left, the way their jokes stopped landing the moment you raised an eyebrow. You silenced them, not with rage, not with threats, but with something much worse in their world: authenticity. Because when someone shows up without needing to prove anything, the ones who've built their entire identity around performance start to suffocate. They call it arrogance. They call it cold. But it's not. It's power. And power doesn't apologize for not fitting in. They miss the comfort of the echo chamber. They miss being the loudest voice in the room. They miss the days before you arrived, when mediocrity was never challenged, when realness was rare enough to ignore. But those days are over, because now you're in the room, and every time you speak, they feel the walls closing in. You don't need the last word. You already had the only one that mattered, and it's still echoing, long after they stopped pretending to laugh. They're not afraid of conflict. They're afraid of consequence. The consequence of being seen, the consequence of not being in charge, the consequence of finally facing someone they can't manipulate, charm, or shut down. And now they sit quietly, smiles tight, egos bruised, trying to rebuild a dynamic you've already destroyed beyond repair. They don't say it out loud, but they know. They know the old rules don't apply when you're around. They know their tricks, the passive digs, the fake alliances, the cowardly little cliques. Don't work anymore. You walked in and changed the ecosystem, and once something evolves, it can't go back. You didn't just burn the blueprint. You rewrote the entire architecture of how power moves in that space, and they're still scrambling, trying to figure out how one presence, one unapologetic force, could undo everything they built through years of manipulation and control. You shattered it with nothing but your existence. You're not just the hot topic. You're the shift, the new standard, the walking reminder that fear-based order can't survive in the presence of uncompromising truth. They sit quiet now because they don't know what to do with someone who doesn't want their approval, doesn't need their attention, doesn't care about their opinions. That's the most terrifying kind of human, the one who's already chosen themselves. They talk tough when you're not around, rehearse lines in their head about what they should have said, convince themselves they could have checked you if they wanted to. But none of them moved. None of them stepped up. None of them dared. Because in the moment, they felt it. That pressure, that heaviness in the air when your words hit. That collective pause when the performance stops and reality walks in with a smile sharp enough to draw blood. You made them feel small, not with insults, not with ego, but with clarity. You know who you are. And in a room full of people performing identities, that is the loudest frequency in existence. They'll deny it. They'll downplay it. They'll try to act unbothered. But they know. They know who ran the room that day. They know who set the tone. They know who turned a group of performers into an audience and never even raised their voice. You flipped the dynamic without ever touching it. You didn't need to climb the ladder. You watched it collapse beneath their feet while you stood on solid ground. Now they walk differently. Now they speak softer. Now they check themselves before they speak. Because you changed the atmosphere permanently. And even if they try to patch it back together, they'll always feel the cracks. Because once truth enters the space, real, raw, unfiltered truth, it stains. And you didn't just leave a mark, you etched your presence into the foundation. Now every new person who walks in feels the shift. They hear your name before it's spoken. They feel the pressure in the room and don't know where it's coming from. It's coming from you, from what you did, from who you are. You're not a moment, you're a monument. Not a spike in the conversation, but the silence that follows and stays. They try to move on, try to reset, try to go back to how things were before you arrived. But they can't, because once someone like you walks through a room, the air changes forever. You became folklore, unintended myth, the name that keeps coming up, even when no one's saying it. The face they try not to bring up. Because when they do, the tension returns, and it always returns. Because you're not just a presence, you're a reality check, the confrontation of everything they've ignored, repressed, denied. You're the moment people remember when they realize they've been living at half volume. You're the regret in their chest when they sit alone, wondering why they never said what they meant, while you said it all without blinking. You didn't just win the room, you rewrote the rules of what winning looks like. It wasn't applause, it wasn't praise, it was dominion, the kind of control that doesn't need a crown, doesn't need a spotlight, doesn't need a vote. You earned a respect too raw to admit, the kind of respect that festers inside people who wish they didn't have to admire you, and still do, silently, begrudgingly, obsessively. You haunt them, because they saw someone move through fire without burning, speak truth without flinching, walk alone without shaking, and it shattered something inside them. You're not just that one moment. You're a living fracture in their timeline, a before and after. Before you walked in, they were comfortable. After you left, they started questioning everything. And the ones who hated you most, they hate you because you woke them up. You made them see the limits of their own courage. You made them realize how much they've sacrificed for approval. And in doing that, you forced them to face the fact that they were never free. But you are, and that makes you dangerous. You're not here for applause. You're not here for followers. You're not here for fame. You showed up to be what no one else had the guts to be. Unfiltered, unbothered, unstoppable. You're the one who shut the whole group down and made silence feel like thunder. You're the one who said the thing no one else could even think out loud. You're the one who walked out with no mic drop. Because the silence was the mic drop. You are the hot topic, the cold truth, the ghost in their system, the name they won't forget even if they never say it again. You left your imprint on the ground they thought they owned, and now they walk over it carefully, hoping you never come back, knowing you already never left.